Reading now from the Gospel of Jesus Christ according to Matthew, chapter 22, verses 15 through 22. If you'd like to read along, you'll find it on page 32 in the New Testament. The Pharisees went off and made a plan to trap Jesus with questions. Then they sent to him some of their disciples and some members of Herod's party. "Teacher," they said, "we know that you tell the truth. You teach the truth about God's will for people without worrying about what others think, because you pay no attention to anyone's status. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it against our law to pay taxes to the Roman emperor or not?" Jesus, however, was aware of their evil plan, and so he said, "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin for paying the tax." They brought him the coin. And he asked them, "Whose face and name are those?" "The emperor's," they answered. So Jesus said to them, "Well then, pay to the emperor what belongs to the emperor, and pay to God what belongs to God." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. Is it against our law to pay taxes to the Roman emperor or not? It's a trick question that the Pharisees and the Herodians toss at Jesus, hoping to entrap him. If Jesus answers yes, it is against Jewish law to pay taxes to Caesar, then the Romans will peg him as a troublemaker, even a rebel. On the other hand, if Jesus answers no, then the Jewish people will consider him to be a Roman collaborator. For Jesus, it's catch-22. Or at least it looks that way. But here's the interesting thing. The Herodians and the Pharisees don't even agree when it comes to Roman relations. The Herodians mostly support the Roman government, while the Pharisees tend to oppose it. The Herodians include much of the Jewish aristocracy, the wealthy class. And as such, they stand most to gain by cooperating with the Romans. Not surprisingly, they support paying tax to Rome, to Caesar. The Pharisees, on the other hand, are zealous advocates of Jewish law. They're the religiously pious, you might say, paying special attention to every detail in that law. Not surprisingly, the Pharisees oppose paying tax to Caesar. Not because the Romans are an occupying force in the Holy Land, in God's land, but believe it or not, because of the special coin that the Jews are required to use to pay the Roman tax. The coin. The special coin the Jews are to use is the silver denarius, which carries on one side of it the graven image of Emperor Tiberius. And on the other side of the coin, the inscription, Caesar Augustus Tiberius, son of the divine Augustus. The claim being, of course, that Tiberius was the son of the god and Caesar Augustus. So the Pharisees consider the use of this coin to be a violation of the first and second commandments. Commandment 1, you shall have no other gods before me. And number 2, you shall not make for yourself a graven image. And so huge differences exist between the Herodians and the Pharisees. And yet, both groups are so committed to entrapping Jesus. They're so worried about this guy. They're intimidated by this guy. So much so they're willing to come together for a common purpose. As I said before, Jesus seems to be caught in catch-22. Pay the tax to Caesar and his occupying force. Pay the tax using the denarius coin you're required to use. Use the coin with the graven image on it, the image of a man named Tiberius claiming to be divine. Use the coin that contravenes 2 of God's laws and see how the Jewish people are going to treat you. Or refuse to pay the tax and see how the Romans are going to treat you. So how does Jesus respond to his inquisitors? In a word, sharply. Why are you trying to trap me? Jesus says. Show me the coin for paying the tax, he demands. And this is what grabs me, and I offer it to you for consideration. The moment the Pharisees and the Herodians produce the coin, the moment they pull out of their pockets a denarius with a graven image on one side and the claim to Caesar's divinity on the other, Jesus traps them. Rather than be trapped himself, Jesus cleverly traps his adversaries. If these men are proper Jews, as they claim to be, if they're observant of Jewish law, as they ought to be, then none of them should have these coins in their pockets. Right? But Jesus doesn't stop at this embarrassment. He provides an important teaching as well. Looking at the coin, he asks, whose face and name are on these? The emperor's, they answer. To which Jesus responds, well then, pay to the emperor what belongs to the emperor, and pay to God what belongs to God. Of course, we all know that the entire universe belongs to God. Every speck of matter, every bit of energy. A universe. Now, we could stop our interpretation of the passage right there. Okay? We could leave it at the whole universe belongs to God. So why worry about the small amount that Caesar might control? It's negligible in comparison, right? But I think what Jesus is suggesting here is that his followers have a dual allegiance, both to the teachings and the commands of God and to the government under whose flag and laws they live. Which is why, incidentally, it never bothered me why there was a flag, a national flag in a church. Because again, the flag representing the government is housed, surrounded within the house of God. So it puts it in proper relation. But that's just an aside. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? It's not a simple question of economics or politics or dual citizenship. It's not that. Essentially, it's a question of conscience. It's a question of what to do when allegiance to Caesar conflicts with allegiance to God. Now what? And the question of conscience is as confounding and compelling today as it was in the first century. The issue for most of us today, as much as we might grumble, is not about whether or not we should pay taxes in general. We know we pay taxes everywhere we turn. It's more about watching what our government is doing, I think, of deciding whether or not in good conscience we can support its actions. It's when our conscience comes into conflict with government action that this passage about rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's and rendering unto God what is God's, it really comes into sharp focus. It's at times of conflict. For example, what exactly should followers of Christ do when their government takes action either to support or to oppose same-sex marriage? Should Christian taxpayer money be used to support abortion projects? Or on the flip side, family planning projects? Should the use of marijuana, cocaine, or heroin be decriminalized? Should Christian taxpayer money be used to support either position? And here's one. Should Christians withhold some of their taxes to protest Harper's recent decision to send 6 CF-18 fighter jets, support planes, and hundreds more military personnel to Iraq? I think that these and many other issues speak to the places where this passage challenges the church today. This passage is very real, very relatable to us today. Years ago, I completed my undergrad degree in religious studies at Conrad Grebel College. And it's a Mennonite school, and it's affiliated with the University of Waterloo. While I was there, I learned how central to Mennonite faith is the quest for peace and the renunciation of all things war. At Emmanuel College, where I completed my master's degree, I took several courses in peace and conflict studies. And I took these courses, again, from a renowned Mennonite professor. And at the heart of the courses I took rested the same question: is it lawful in God's eyes to pay taxes to Caesar or not? In other words, is it lawful to resist the military? Is it lawful to resist conscription into the military? Is it lawful for Christians to withhold taxes that eventually will be allocated to the Department of National Defense? On the cover of a publication produced by Conscience Canada, you may have heard of it, It's an organization rooted in the Mennonite Church. There's a picture of a Canadian F-16 fighter jet taking off almost vertical, with great plumes of exhaust coming out its back. And the caption reads, "This F-16 killing machine uses more fuel in 1 hour than an average car owner consumes in 2 years. Take the bang out of your tax buck. Don't pay for war." The same publication also tries to answer a very common question. What will happen to me if I don't pay my full tax bill to the government? If I withhold 523 tax dollars, the average Canadian contributes toward the military every year. What will happen to me? This is what they write. Based on the experience of other conscientious objectors to military taxation, the authors write, you will likely receive a notice from Revenue Canada stating that you owe them the amount you diverted. When amounts of tax money diverted have reached into the hundreds, and after communication with Revenue Canada employees, in brackets, who are most often friendly, some people have received letters threatening legal action. Subsequently, Revenue Canada has taken money back from some conscientious objectors by means of guaranteed wages, deduction from tax refunds owed, or withdrawals directly from your bank account. If they close, conscientious objectors have always had time to make a payment before collection occurs, if they so choose. Conscience Canada provides moral support and advice to conscientious objectors throughout the process. So there's one side. Now, in my case, and at the bewilderment of many people, I admit, including many United Church ministers, my colleagues, I chose to don the Air Force uniform. I chose to join a military organization, knowing full well what it was trained to do. But fortunate for me, I joined as a chaplain and as one forbidden to bear arms, as one forbidden to cause bodily harm, much less take the life of another human being. The same organization that trains young men and women to kill had long made it a court-martial offense for a chaplain to even sport a gun on a practice range. And it's always been my belief, and it remains the belief of the Canadian Forces, that chaplains will always stand for the better way. The chaplains will always represent to the men and women around them the fact that violence never works over the long run. That there's no glory in war, only pain. That the way of peace and of dialogue and of understanding still remains our best hope and long-term strategy. And that the job of the chaplain will always be to support, to be present with those who find themselves immersed in the reality and the cruelty of war. Present to those who would gladly, trust me, gladly turn and exit that battlefield with their buddies in tow. If only they had the choice. If only they had the chance. It's a messy business, ethics, military or otherwise. Deciding between Caesar and God. That's a messy business indeed. There's never a single clear answer to an ethical question. There's never a universal right or wrong. There's no single answer to a single question. There only exists shades of gray, shades of doubt, shades of decision and indecision, shades of alternatives, questions, and consequences. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? What do we do when allegiance to Caesar conflicts with allegiance to God? These are the questions of conscience in a world where the issues are never easy. But Christians have never been excused from engaging the issues. It's not an option for us. I'll close by simply saying, may God be with us as we muddle through the issues. May God be with us.